Hello, everybody.
Hi, Marlene.
Hi, Tiffany. Welcome to our third episode, I think,
It's
for
our
the
third
Educator
episode.
Spotlight with Dr. P and
Tiffany.
okay.
So again, we're glad to be here with you, and we want to talk about our partnership, which is built on empowering minds, inspiring futures, and supporting educators today.
And we are highlighting and paving the way, and we are also difference for difference makers. So I'm glad to have you again for our third episode. How are you, Tiffany?
I'm doing well, and you?
I'm really great. So for the past two episodes, we talked about something different. So to this episode, we uh we will consider talking about classroom management. And I'll have a question for you. When you were a teacher, what kind of a teacher were you? Were you that kind of like strict, like all the way strict, or did you give a chance for students to really like, be themselves for a
Mhm.
moment?
Yes, I really allow students to be themselves because I'm not a strict person at all. So it's kind of hard for me to have that sort of style when I was teaching. I will say that I do believe in being fair, being firm, being consistent, but I
Correct.
do understand that children are children and
Mhm.
that we have to teach them and model the expectations in which we want to see in them. I used to say that all the time when I was an assistant principal to our teachers when it came to student behavior. Sometimes students will come to school not following directions. I know we all see that sometimes, they speak out of turn. They, might decide they're going to hit their neighbor. There's going to be several different things that they might decide to do when they're in the class. But that's why it's so important that you have those rules and procedures as you're stating. And I'm going to ask you that same question. What type of teacher did you think you are? And then we can kind of elaborate from there. So what kind of teacher were you?
I was with a family where kind of like they're strict. So I kind of have like a Spanish blood within me.
Okay.
So I like structure. So there's a difference between being strict and making sure that there's a system in place that everything is structured and organized. Because I believe that as early as the moment you have the children in your classroom, you will let them understand that, hey, we have rules and procedures in place and the expectations are high up to par. Then you mentioned about consistency, you mentioned about firmness, you mentioned about being fair.
Mhm.
And I believe that me being a structured teacher myself, I want it that kids will understand that, hey, there's a rule when we want to talk. You
Mhm.
don't just blurt out answers or anything. And that's part of classroom management.
Mhm.
And as far as I know, we don't need, as teachers, we don't need 100 rules for them to follow, one or two, as long as you will do it consistently
Mhm.
and knowing that you model it yourselves to show
Right.
to your children that, hey, this is what I'm doing. I'm modeling it for you, and they
Mhm.
see it from you. So I wouldn't say I'm strict. I just want structure and being organized in the classroom.
Mhm.
And before we had this video, we talked about building relationship. And
Mhm.
that's one thing that I want to ensure that from the first day I have my students when I was in the classroom, first day that I have students, whether I'm on the beginning of the year, middle of the year, or partly end of the year, if I the first time I will see my students, I want to make sure that I have that kind of connection. And you can feel who are
Mhm.
those kids who are kind of behave. And you also have to be on the lookout for those who are also testing your patience because we
Right.
have some, not a lot of them, but some of them. So
And
yeah.
I'm nodding exactly when you stated that because with the structure, which I totally agree, I have to have structure even in anything that I'm doing because that keeps me organized and it keeps me paced. So to hear you say that, that does make a lot of sense. It has to be a framework. But I think a lot of times when students come and like you just stated, some of them, we know that some of them are going to just come they're going to try to test your patience. But you have to always consider, okay, if the student is testing my patience, then, what can I do to set some boundaries? Because all
Mm-hmm.
kids really want is boundaries. They just want to see how much you're going to let them get by with. So when they
Correct.
do see that there's some boundaries in place, they may act like they don't like it, but they know that that means that, this teacher or this adult cares about me enough to get things structured. That's going to, you're going to plan a great lesson. You're going to engage me. That's a
Mm-hmm.
very important part of classroom management as well, because you want to make sure your students feel like they're included, they're welcomed, like you stated, to talk, for them to be able to talk to one another. I loved my students having opportunities to talk to one another because they're going to talk. And then sometimes they can be quite chatty, especially when you're not wanting them to
Correct.
be because you're needing them to listen. But if they can
Correct.
have some opportunities in the classroom to have that academic discourse, to be able to talk back and forth to one another, that helps take care of some of that chattiness that they may have because they are having the opportunity to socialize in the room as well. So you do have to build some structures that they can do for socialization that's going to
Mhm.
help build that academic structure and atmosphere that you're wanting in the room.
Correct. Because I have been into a Title One school, and when I present some things to the teachers, they always tell me that, hey, you have to consider the nature of the children or where they come from.
Mhm.
And I personally understand because they have their own struggle. They always say they have their own traumas and everything. They have their own aces and everything. We do
Mhm.
the same thing, but it is for me. It is our major responsibility to ensure that students have the consistency in their lives.
Mhm.
So when we talked about classroom management piece, I think of it as more of a teacher directed activity
Mhm.
because we are the adult in the classroom and they are just children
Right.
and they need our guidance. They need some verbal, instructions that they have to follow. So I was looking at like why do we have classroom management?
Mhm.
And it is a teacher owned piece where the teacher can do anything as long as it's aligned with, with the mission and vision of the school. And
Right.
it's also empowering as a teacher when you know that your students are listening to you, when you know that students are remembering the expectations, remembering the classroom rules and procedures, when you know that even if you're just looking at them and they know what it means,
Mhm.
it's empowering for you. That,
Mhm.
that means you're an effective teacher. And when you do classroom management and you can see there's order and you are kind of like being friendly and engaging in a way, because there are some teachers who really just want to be like a military style. I mean, no offense with those military, because I feel like I am,
Mhm.
but if you can do it if you can do it like in a friendly way where students still understand, because I believe yelling, like I can hear some other teachers who are, yelling at the top of their lungs, but it's ineffective.
Mhm.
So if you do it in a friendly and engaging way, you will
Mhm.
have an amazing school year when in terms of, classroom management.
I'm so glad you stated that. I always think about the teacher personality. Of course, our
Mhm.
personality
Yes,
is going to
number
kind
one.
of, right,
Mhm.
it's going to
Mhm.
kind of help build that community in the class. So if you are
Correct.
more strict and maybe have an authoritarian
Mhm.
type style of teaching, then I'm not going to say students aren't going to learn, because I think there are always going to be students who are going to come to school ready to learn, no matter who they have as their teacher. But if you're noticing that you're not connecting with those students, you're just wanting them to be compliant. So to me, there's a difference in being
Mhm.
engaged and being compliant. And I
Mhm.
think a lot of times as educators, we tend to think if the student is being compliant, then they're being engaged and then they are showing great behavior. And when
Mhm.
some students who just are talkative, doesn't mean that they're, are have inappropriate behavior. They just are talkative. It doesn't mean that those students aren't going to learn. It doesn't mean those students aren't engaged. So you do need to know the
Correct.
difference between, yes, we want our students to be compliant, but I don't want a student to feel like that they're afraid of me, or that
Right.
if, you know,
Mhm.
I come in and I'm, like you stated, I'm going to yell. Because to me, even an authoritarian teacher is not effective if they're going to yell. An authoritarian teacher possibly could be strict and the classroom may roll around fine, but I'm like you, when it comes to yelling, that usually means that that class is out of control. The students know it. And
Mhm.
then that's why it kind of gets out of hand, and the teacher may think, well, if I raise my voice, then I'll get them to mind me. However, we know most of the time when you raise your voice, the kids tend to get louder, and then eventually they'll just not listen to you at all because they're like, well, you know, all they do is yell. And I used to tell teachers too, some of our kids come from homes where, you know, and I'm not blaming
Yelling,
parents,
yelling
saying
is
their
the normal.
backgrounds are
Mhm.
different, right? It's normal for some of them. So they may not really um know that that's something they shouldn't be doing because it might be something they're used to hearing. So it's not
Correct.
something that's going to make, it's kind of like when you have a your own child and they're walking, maybe a 2-year old. If
Mhm.
I use a tone that I'm always sounding like I'm yelling, if my 2-year old runs
Mhm.
out the street, they're not going to know that I mean business because my voice is always like that. However,
Mhm.
if I happen to use a calm voice most of the time and they run out in the street and I yell, that's probably going to stop them because they're going to know that's not the tone that she normally uses for me. So something
Mhm.
is wrong here. So I need to stop. So you just need to
Correct.
think about your tone. You need to think about what's more important is, you know, we don't want to get in a power struggle. We talked about that a little bit before we started. I know sometimes we tend to do that, and then we tend to think, yes, I am the adult in charge, but I'm not going to argue with a child because, you know,
No.
we're not going to have that back and forth. And kids
Mhm.
know that, and they're wanting that adult. Like we just stated, they want those boundaries.
Correct. And
Mhm.
when you mentioned about connection, it makes a huge difference with you mentioned boundaries, but I
Mhm.
think what's more impactful for our children is the connection that you're gonna make.
Mhm.
Um, we mentioned about yelling. This not does not really work. Now that I am with pre-K through middle school,
Mhm.
it wouldn't really, never. And when I was in the classroom, I would remember that if I go into the classroom, because I'm an inclusion teacher before, so I
Mhm.
go to different classes, so I see every different types of classroom management of every teacher that I go to.
Mhm.
And there are teachers who, I'm not sure if they really know what they're into. Um, I would probably sometimes say, do you really want to be a teacher? That kind of question, because
Yeah.
it's kind of just like, okay, I don't think that works. And but me, when I go into a classroom, I I make sure that I also prepare,
Mhm.
because the children can feel.
Yes.
They feel it first before you even say
Mhm.
something.
Right.
And especially if they see, especially those who have a long-term substitute
Mhm.
teachers, and they say like every day is a different face that they see,
Right.
they will always kind of like test you, whoever is the adult in the classroom.
Right.
So what I always do is I make sure that when I go into the classroom, I have something. I know what I'm doing,
Mhm.
because the kids can feel, and
Mhm.
that's when they will test you at the beginning. And so
Yes.
when they start to crack up or something, I already know what you do. So you really have to have a lot of tricks for our children to ensure that your classroom management is intact. Because
Mhm.
at any moment, teachers, you will one day you will be in this grade level. The next year you might change your mind. You might be in a different grade level. So you
Mhm.
really have to have that classroom management in peace intact within you.
Mhm. I love that. And I was going to say, you know, exactly, students can tell when you're winging it. So I think one of the
Mhm.
best ways to make sure that you do have great classroom management, it's always being prepared, exactly what you just stated. You need to make sure that those lessons are well prepared. We know that you can plan the most wonderful lesson, and we know things can happen that can throw that lesson off, but you don't let students know that, because we still have to be flexible as teachers, knowing that anything can happen and can throw something off. But if you're coming to work and you're not prepared and kids know that and they sense it, by the time you're looking around, you're like, what happened to my classroom? Because they want the structure, they want the boundaries, they want to see a plan. They want to know that you care about them enough to teach them and to engage them. And exactly what you stated about, I spent most of my career as, I always say, a supervisor of teachers. I was an instructional coordinator, assistant principal, and the principal. And
Mhm.
then, worked on the district level for a little bit and got a chance to go into a whole lot of people's classrooms. And then as a consultant in other areas of the states,
And
I've
you
done the
can
same
see, you
thing.
can see. Uh-huh.
And right, and you can walk into the room and it's a feeling.
Mhm.
That
Yeah,
climate, we
yeah,
always say about the
exactly.
climate. And I think about the climate is when I walk into the classroom, the temperature I feel when I walk in. So if I feel like it's warm and, inviting and cozy, then that's kind of the way the kids act, the teacher act, because their personalities a lot of times reflect what the teacher brings to the table. And then if it's kind of chaotic, and it sometimes makes me feel a little bit unnerved, when I'm in there and I'm kind of seeing that, because it's like, okay, it's not structured. Sometimes, and I will say that I've seen where that works for a particular teacher and the kids are doing all right. It's just that that's how the teacher is, and it doesn't seem to bother the teacher when certain things happen. And then I've been in some classrooms, like when you mentioned about being very strict, like, nothing can be out of place, and kids seem like they're, more afraid and compliant than they are, being engaged in learning. And then I've seen some teachers like, do whatever you want. Like you said, I don't, I'm either I'm burned out, or, maybe this isn't really for me anymore. And then I'm, in the classroom, and I could kind of care less, and the kids can kind of tell, and they care less as well. But I really feel like when you go into this profession, and it's a profession, and when you choose to be a teacher, we are in a profession that makes all other professions possible. And our profession, I believe, even though, I hear people say, we don't get paid very much and all of that. But you went into this knowing that you wanted to make a difference for students. So you have to remember that sometimes we need to put those things aside and realize, am I doing what's in the best interest for my children? Am I going
Mhm.
home every night being able to put my head on my pillow knowing I've done the best I could for my children? And if this is not for me, then I might need to look at something else, because this is our future. And whether people realize it or not, now teachers are very impactful, big influencers, and
Mhm.
it could make or break a child. So I'm like you, I'm very passionate about, trying to do the right thing. Yes, we're gonna have off days. Yes, some days you're gonna feel like quitting. That's life. I think that will almost be in any job. But I think you need
Mhm.
to really take it seriously when you take the job as being a teacher. And if you're realizing that my management may not be exactly where I need it to be, what can I go and learn on my own so that my kids are going to get the best experience possible?
Right. So I kind of like connect classroom management to the structure in place with expectations to our students. I
Mhm.
have a question for you, for both of us actually, and for those who are going to be watching this. What is the most wonderful experience for you in terms of classroom management when you look back or when you think back when you were a teacher? And then
Mhm.
what is going to be like the worst? Because there's some glows, there's also some grows that that we can think of, especially when we were younger, when we were still new into the teaching profession.
Mhm.
So what were those experiences for you?
Great question. I wanted to just say that I always told my kids that I felt like, we were a family away from home, from their family.
Oh, very
And
sweet.
so, thanks. So, in that case, I would tell them, sometimes we don't always get along with people in our family. Sometimes, our little brothers or sisters can, do something that upsets us or whatever. I said, so that can happen in here too. However,
Mm-hmm.
because of the fact that we are a family, we're going to try to work this out. We're not going to continue to allow something to boil that's going to cause an issue. So I try to, and I'm not saying I was perfect, by no means am I saying that. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but I try to get, and I'm sure you were like that as well. You want to try to take care of things to be more proactive than reactive. Because when you become more reactive, that's the way kids are all the time. Everybody's
Right.
reacting. So if you're
Mm-hmm.
thinking about what can I do to be more proactive so that I may not be able to stop everything from happening that I may not want to happen, but I can at least be thinking, what can I do to maybe stop this before it even happens? So I just felt like I really did feel like I had good experiences with my students. I did do some sub work before in college,
Mm-hmm.
as I was getting ready to teach. I think part what helped me as well, and I always bring it up, but that was my mentor. My mother was my mentor, and she would come home and, share stories with us. And so I knew a lot of some of the things that went on in schools, and it kind of helped me to have I think a better maybe background and understanding how I might have to deal with my students. I think another important part of that is making sure that you are a team with the parent. I know I'll hear teachers in my career, I hear, well, I can't get that parent on the phone, or when I call, nothing happens. But when parents know that you care about their child, and I'm not saying you don't care, I'm just saying when they feel it and they know it, and you're actually the partner with that parent is going to back you in whatever they can do to make sure the child needs to do what they need to do. Now, I do know there are some extenuating circumstances where that might not be the case, but even I really can't ever tell you that it was a parent I could never get a hold of, even when I was a principal. I've always been able to get a hold to a parent. So I can't, I know sometimes just numbers change, life happens, stuff like that happens, but I was still always able to get in contact. Even if I had to call an uncle or a grandfather, they would put me in contact. And I think it was the tone that I use, because I feel like, children need to be respected, their parents need to be respected, and I need to
Mm-hmm.
be respected. But people tend to
Right.
respect you when you respect them. So I felt
Right.
like I never really had an issue with a lot of my parents, because we just always had a back and forth. And I always would tell them, and it was really the truth, that I'm truly your partner in education. It's one thing that I put on my message for the work that I do in my
Mm-hmm.
emails. That's my closing phrase, because I truly am your partner. So as we are thinking about that, I don't ever want a parent thinking that, I feel like that I'm above them, or I feel like their child is just this and that. No, we're going to talk about it. We're going to say, what can we do that's in the best interest of Johnny? That's the issue. What are
Sure.
we going to do so that we can help Johnny? Because that's what this is about. And when they really truly feel that, you're gonna have that. So I do know, and I'm sure, with you being in school every day, you might tend to hear sometimes when, teachers may come and say, well, I'm having trouble getting in contact with this parent, or this parent um, you know, is upset with me, or I'm upset with this parent, whatever the case is. It needs to be known that you are truly that partner with that parent, so that you can try to get those students reared in, however you need to do it, to make sure that they're getting the best educational experience possible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so for me, yeah, that's really wonderful. I was, making notes, when you talk about parents, we're a partner,
Mhm.
because yeah, when I look back with my experience when I was a teacher, in the classroom, uh, I always ensure that the students know that I am their parents' friend.
Yes.
So when if there's because there's always one or two, and when I when I go into the classroom, I read the class, beyond the line, read the classroom, and it's just like, oh, this child is kind of like really gonna be on me, so this child will be one-on-one with me, and I know he will have a problem because he will have a hard time understanding or following our expectations. So when I remember there was this fourth grade class that I always step in because the teacher is, kind of like late. So I stepped in, and there's this one child who's always, misbehaving despite of anything that I will do. And so, the calling the numbers on J Campus and everything, I always make sure that I have my computer with me, and I make sure that I show them the J Campus thing. And I said, I can search you right now, and I'm going to call home. And I said, I don't mind using my phone, and I'm gonna dial the phone, and then the parent will answer. And sometimes if I'm not doing it in the classroom, when I step out, when I go to my own classroom, I'm gonna pull out those children who are misbehaving, disrespecting. And I said, hey, I'm gonna go home, and I make sure if they will not answer, I'm gonna leave a voicemail. And so sometimes they answer you, especially if it's another number.
Right.
So when they answer me, and I always have this introductory say like, hey, this is so and so, and you know what, and, I'm trying to, help your child. And, you know, I always make sure that the parents feel that, hey, I am with your child, and I make sure that I am going to be supporting your child. Me and you will be working together, to ensure that your child is learning in the school, and then when they get home, they will be able to, to do what's best for them. And I always do that. And I said, hey, I said, this is my cell phone number, you can save it, and you can put it in speed dial and everything. So this kid who is misbehaving every day, I keep pounding and pounding and pounding on you. It's kind of like it gets softer and softer. And then the next thing I know, I just give a look, and it's like, and then the child already knows
what's gonna happen.
So it's really, it's more of really working hard, because it takes a lot. You mentioned about teachers being, we are the greatest profession of all time because we make other, professions. But when I was sharing with the other teachers, I said, we are not just a profession, we are a vocation. We're making a vocation because this is a lifetime commitment.
Right.
If you don't work as hard as you do to make a change, one child at a time, nothing will ever happen.
That's right.
Then one thing that I would also share is I want the kids to miss me when I'm out.
Yeah.
And yeah, because that means when they see you the next day, I said, hey, where was you? So that means they miss you. That means they're looking forward to see you every day. And
Right.
I'm not sure if I share this with you, that when I took over one fourth grade class, and there were kind of like 10 of them, because the teachers needed support, and I stepped in, and it was kind of like the middle of the school year. But every day, like when we talked about growth mindset, this teacher always says, oh, they will never submit an assignment, because I've tried it many times. Oh, the parents will not answer you. And I said, where's your proof? I said, I will only believe it if I know I have done enough and it's not happening.
Right.
So I tried giving assignments and assignments, and they see me that if you are working hard from bell to bell, and you know that you are concerned about their learning, they will, if you put forth effort for them, and they can feel that you are really working hard towards them, they will give it to you more than 100 times.
Exactly.
And I can believe that, because that was 2020. That was prior to the COVID, the shutdown, when they shut down the school. And I said, I'm going to give an assignment. So first few days, they only give like one or two. And I said, you know what? This is for a grade. And if this is a grade for you. And then I just keep being patient, and and the next thing I know, all of them submit their assignment. And when they will see me in the hallway, because sometimes I don't go to the class because I say, hey, I will tell them, say, I'm not gonna go to your class because I have other things to do, but I will see you the next day. I
Mhm.
said, the one student who is like he would not do a thing. And then the next thing I know, I made a difference in him because he will participate, he will do his work, he will submit his assignments. And then he saw me in the hallway. And he was telling me, Dr. P, I'm done with my assignment. When can I submit that? I said,
Mhm.
oh, that's for tomorrow. So he
Mhm.
was doing the assignment, I was like, oh, that's for tomorrow, but I will get it for you tomorrow. I said, Dr. P, we did not see you in our class today. So,
Mhm.
oh, because I have a meeting, so, but I will see you tomorrow.
Right.
So really, it's really depending on the teacher who really cares
Yes.
towards their children.
Right. And kids pick that up. I love the story you just shared. And it's about those high expectations as well, because they knew that you made that assignment, you expected it to be turned in, and sometimes that's just all it takes. It's just that they just want to know that what I do matters. Am I being heard? Am I being seen when I'm in class? And again, I know there are some people who feel like, well, students should come to school and just automatically do that. But that's not the age that we're in anymore. And students want to be respected. And I can't blame them. I want to be respected. So a lot of times I remember too, I will say this, when I was working for the district and we were doing PBIS and we were getting trained by people outside of the district. Um, and one of the things that they mentioned was when they gave out a survey to students, no matter the age, and I'm sure maybe not a kindergartner as much, but elementary and middle and high school students, and they would ask them, what's the most important thing that you want from your teacher? And they told them to be respected. That was across the board. So that lets you know that that means something to them. I know back in our day that, you just respected adults because they were the adults and you just were always told you respect them. But I know kids can feel if they're being disrespected, and many of them are being disrespected in other areas of their life. And so if they're getting that at school as well, it just shuts some of them down, and then they may feel, well, if I act up, then I may get a little attention if I act up, so then I'll just act up. So we're back to saying that I believe all of that is going to be exactly what we've talked about with the connections that you're making, the effort, like you stated, putting the effort in, being intentional about doing that, and then really bringing in the parents. And I do want to say too, I've run across teachers in my career that anytime a child did misbehave, the first thing they did was call the parent.
Mm-hmm.
And then that doesn't work after a while because the parent is expecting
Mm-hmm.
you as the
Mm-hmm.
professional to do what you do
Correct.
on your end, and then they're going to
Mm-hmm.
do what they can
Mm-hmm.
do at home. But it's kind of hard if
Right.
I'm a parent and I'm at work, I'm not there with my child, so how I can, get on to them and say whatever, but that doesn't mean he's going to go back to the room and do what he needs to do for you. So
Mm-hmm.
that's why it's so important for you to establish those relationships, for you to let them know, that you mean business in a respectful manner. I'm not your
Correct.
friend as a teacher because I am the adult, so we can't necessarily be on that same wavelength, but I can act friendly towards you to let you know how much I
Mm-hmm.
care about you and how much I want you to just do well. So I just think that sometimes we just need to not be so quick to say, this child acts this way, this parent won't call me back, or the parent won't come up here. A lot of times they're working 2 and 3 jobs. They want to come, they can't come. So that should never stop you from doing your job, because your job is to teach them, and you're with them almost 8 hours, 5 days a week. So I'm glad we had this conversation, and I know we'll have more like it, but it's just um we're just passionate about that because we know that it can happen, but you just have to put some things in place and, follow through with those things.
Mm-hmm. And I think we're almost,
Mhm.
to the end of our session for our episode.
Mhm.
And I think one more thing I can say is that even the greatest teacher with classroom management, it does not happen overnight. It
Right.
takes a lot of patience.
Yes, it does.
It takes a lot of challenges. It takes a
Mhm.
lot of strategies. It takes
Mhm.
a lot of hard work, parent communication to
Mhm.
make things turn around.
Right.
So we just have to learn to be patient. We just have to reflect. Reflection is one of the best things a teacher can do, because without reflection, you will not be able to know where you fall
Mhm.
short
Mhm.
and where you need to grow more and where you need to keep improving. So
Right.
we just need to be hopeful, because this is a lifetime commitment. If you want to be an educator, it's a lifetime commitment. And
Yes.
that's my part words. So what's your words, Tiffany?
Well, I'm sorry, what was your question? Kind of broke up a little bit. I'm sorry.
I would my parting words. I just shared my
Oh,
parting
parting
words.
words. Okay.
Yeah, what
Yeah. So
parting words
well,
for?
first of all, I love those parting words that you just shared. I do agree with you that it is a process. Um,
Mhm.
There's some, I call it the power of the P's, when you're trying to build that community. And one of
Correct.
them is part process. It's really, um, making sure that you plan, you have that process and you practice. So, you need to just look at the fact that there are, I'll always say this, but there are always going to be days that can, kind of make us wonder what happened today, or is this really for me? But I'm like
Correct.
you, if you're going to make this lifelong commitment as an educator, then you truly need to give yourself some grace and give
Mhm.
your students and your parents and the community around you some grace. And just do the best that you can. That I think that was my biggest takeaway from when I would
Mhm.
go home in the evening times, because again, some days would be harder than others, some days were more challenging, some days were rolled around very well. But
Correct.
if we kind of let
Correct.
some of those challenging days just keep building up this anxiousness in us, and um helping us to burn out a little bit easier because we're so anxious and worried and tired, then you're not going to give your best. And what are your students going to get from the experience? And what are you truly getting from the experience? So again, I want to say again, you just got to plan, have
Mhm.
that structure, build those relationships, and then make sure that you're taking care of yourself as well so that you won't burn out.
Correct. And
Mhm.
so that ends our session for our episode 3. And I hope
Okay,
that if you're watching our video right now, you will be able to like and subscribe. And you can also feel free to share your classroom
please.
management experiences as a teacher.
Mhm.
And you're always welcome if you want to be part of our video or podcast. You're always welcome. Just, make a comment below.
Yeah, and we'll reach out to you. Well,
Okay.
sounds good. It was
Bye,
good talking
everyone.
to you. Bye bye, Marlene.
Okay.
Hi, everybody.